So basically, in terms of just when we're talking about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine, and now that the school is going to require vaccination for all of its community members when we return in the fall, those who are eligible, some parents are apprehensive about giving their child a COVID-19 vaccine. What words of advice can you offer concerned parents as a pediatrician and as a parent?
Look, I understand anytime something new on the medical side comes to the market, there's always some degree of understandable worry or a desire to kind of ensure that everything is going as well as it possibly can. Kind of the way I look at it, actually wearing three different hats. Hat number one, which we'll get to, is as a pediatrician and a pediatric endocrinologist. Hat number two is as a parent, and as you pointed out, I have 4 kids that run the spectrum of ages from as young as age 2 to as old as age 16. So, obviously I'm thinking about things from a pretty wide berth. And then third, I actually spent the better part of a decade at the beginning of my career as a drug reviewer at the FDA. So hopefully that can provide some useful context. Just taking those one by one in turn. As a pediatrician, we get questions all the time from parents of kids of all ages about, is this worth it? Does it work? And most importantly, is it safe? And what I'll say, kind of spoiler alert, the question of safety is common to all 3 of these different areas I'm going to talk about. And frankly, in my opinion, is the most important. From the pediatric angle and as a practitioner's angle, what I'm thinking about first and foremost is, does the potential benefit and of treatment with this vaccine outweigh any possible risks? And in my opinion, as a practitioner, and what I tell families that ask me about it, the answer to this is yes. Number one, I think all of the age ranges for whom the vaccine has been approved, there is essentially 100% effectiveness in the clinical trials as far as they've looked at this vaccine in terms of preventing serious complications from COVID-19, which really is what we're looking to do. We want to keep people out of hospitals, out of intensive units and intensive care units. We want them to be able to manage this if they run into it as well as they possibly can without those sorts of outcomes. There's no question from a safety standpoint that these vaccines, and in fact, the Pfizer vaccine that is eligible for kids, our kids' ages, works. So then it comes down to the question of safety. And the way I look at it is, in the clinical trials and in the real world, do the potential adverse effects of the vaccine, are they worse? Will they cause a worse situation than the potential outcomes of COVID? And look, we know that thankfully for young kids, they tend to have fewer obvious adverse events from COVID. They tend to do quite well. Kids are super resilient, which is the most amazing thing about being a pediatrician. But by the same token, they are not immune without a vaccine. They are not immune without having been exposed to it, and they still carry risk. And as we've read, there are certain things that can happen, such as kind of the multisystemic inflammatory response that many kids unfortunately have gotten and had very difficult outcomes. And they still are what we call a vector. They can transmit the virus to others who are non-vaccinated and who are at risk. When you look at the safety profile of this product in clinical trials, the side effect profile is really quite incredibly safe. And so while I understand why parents understandably would be concerned about a new therapeutic option, a vaccine specifically for their youngest kids, in my personal opinion, what I tell anyone who will listen is the potential risks that we know about and that I feel confident will be common even years after treatment are far, far less severe than the potential impact of COVID on these kids and on people whom they can potentially infect. So that's the pediatrician standpoint.
Okay.
From a parent standpoint, again, I look at this from an angle. I try to take the clinician hat off and think about this as a parent of a kid who has a range of ages in my home. And I see there being a significant difference right now in my 2 older kids, one of whom was of the age above 16 when the initial cohort of people who it was approved for and got both doses. One of whom is 13, so waited until it was approved in that age range and then got both doses. And I see what they can do now and the freedom with which they can live their lives. compared to my 2 and 4-year-old who, as I said, they are resilient. They have gotten used to wearing masks unbelievably, but still, in indoor settings, for sure, they have to continue to wear masks. When they go into public settings where we have a concern that we may be around people who have chosen on their own not to get vaccinated, they have to wear masks. That is a challenge, and for a parent who has to deal with 2 completely different, circumstances, it is difficult and it is hard to explain. And frankly, what I'm thinking about is, what is the best way to allow my entire family to be able to go back to the way of life that they enjoyed before this pandemic? So that's what I'm thinking about. And my wife, who also is a practitioner, is thinking about, how do we get our family back to where we were? And the vaccine is the best way to do that. And spoiler alert, provided the safety data looks good in that younger age cohort below age 12, we're going to sign our kids up to get our younger kids to get it as well. And then I think about probably, one of the most critical things is, do we feel confident that regulators, the FDA in this case, have taken a good enough, hard enough look and have enough data to assess, yes, the effectiveness, but more importantly, the safety of this product? So do we trust our regulatory authorities? And having worked there, as I said, for the better part of the decade, I can tell you the FDA's number one concern when they're thinking about new products, whether it's a vaccine or a drug product or a device or whatever it is it safe? Do no harm. And having looked at the data that's been presented, and I understand the questions about emergency use authorization versus full approval, but in the data that's been presented and in the data that continues to roll in, there's no question in my mind that FDA has taken a very hard, very good look at the safety above everything else and has determined in each age range that it's approved, they would not put this out on the market. They would not allow practitioners to inject their children with this product if it were not safe and if the safety did not 100-fold. Is it safe enough so that we can deem it to be something that is approvable and reasonable for the general population? The safety efficacy profile is phenomenal, and I feel completely comfortable from all 3 angles, saying this is a product that I think not only do I feel comfortable with for my own kids and my patients, but I think that we should all feel pretty confident in based on what the FDA has said.